we're ready to proclaim that Nikola Jokic is a star.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. And today's Locked On Fantasy Basketball show is also brought to you by Patrick Ewing. Yes, Patrick Ewing is today's Patreon sponsor. So if you want to head across to patreon.com/redrock_bball, you can be a Patreon sponsor as well. That's the second former Knicks player that sponsors this show. We've got Charles Oakley and we've got Patrick Ewing. Hopefully we can get the whole 90s Knicks squad in there. Anthony Mason might be tough for him to do it. Johnny Starks maybe. Maybe we might even get Xavier McDaniel in there, even though he barely played for the Knicks, but still just one of my formative childhood memories, remembering Xavier McDaniel playing for the New York Knicks. I don't think I've mentioned it, but my name is Josh Lloyd, and you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. This was one of the largest stat nights in the NBA, I think it's fair to say, just stupid sort of performances all over the place. So,
let's get to it.
We're going to do our standard thing. Look back at the performances from Friday and then preview the 8 games that we've got coming up on Saturday. Let's start with the monstrous line of the night. There were lots of directions to go for this one, but in the end, there was only one choice, and it's Draymond Green of the Golden State Warriors, because Draymond had an historic night, and it could have been even more historic had he just managed to score. 4 points for Draymond. Didn't stop him getting the triple-double, though. 12 rebounds, 10 assists, 10 steals, and 5 blocks. He was 1 point away from a 5x5, which I think we were going to dub the dream, the Hakeem Olajuwon triple-double 5x5. He was 1 point away from that. He was 6 points away from a 5x5 quadruple-double, which just sounds ludicrously stupid to put up a line like that. And, you know, I probably should have checked this beforehand. I am almost certain that nobody has ever had a quadruple-double 5x5 in the NBA. As it was, Draymond had the first ever triple-double that did not include points, which is a feat in itself. Just a huge, huge performance. He only took 6 shots. He only hit 2 of them, but yeah, everything that he did in this game was ridiculous. You get 10 points, and I often use these sort of comparisons, not 10 points, you get 10 steals. It's the equivalent to someone in the points category scoring like 90 points. It doesn't happen. And your squad over a week averages probably 1 steal per person per game, maybe 1.1. You get 10 of those, that's 10 games worth of production from a player. 10 games. Maybe it's even worth more than 90 points, because normally you get about 15 points per player. Maybe it's 150 points. Shit, it's a lot. You get that, and it makes you real tough to beat. If you're a team that was in the steals, I guess competitive in steals, you get 10 from one bloke, and in that category is over. Draymond over the last 2 weeks is averaging 3.2 steals per game. He's averaging 9.5 points, 8 boards, 2 threes, 6 assists, 3 steals, and 2.5 blocks to be the 6th ranked player over that time frame, despite scoring under 10 points a game and shooting under 40% from the field and shooting 60% from the line. I don't think you'd see those sort of numbers too often. Of course, Draymond's a player that you need to be a punt points guy with majority of the time. He's scoring just 10 points a game this year, and if you did draft him early on, that's when all the big point scorers go. So you missed out on a 20-25 point scorer by drafting him in the second round. And that's fine. But it is hard to catch up in that points category. But what he does in the other areas is impossible to find in other zones. So Draymond, he still comes in as the 16th ranked player this season. But I do mention ranks a lot. But in the end, rankings don't really mean that much. It depends on how everything fits together. And you would have had to have built... He's not an easy player to build around, Draymond, is what I'm probably trying to get. Yes, he contributes in all these other categories, but the points one can be one that is tough to get later on and get in big quantities, so you have to make sure you're well equipped in that sort of a zone. But everything he's doing in those other areas has obviously been fantastic. And probably the most surprising thing with Draymond this season is that his field goal percentage has dipped from 49 down to 44%. So it looks like last season was an outlier in terms of his shooting. He was 44 the year before, 49 last season, 44 this season. And he's 3-point shooting, 33, 34, 39, 33. So that last season just seems like it was an outlier, but everything else he's doing has clearly been fantastic. The waiver wire line of the night. Ben McLemore of the Sacramento Kings. McLemore was put in a really good spot in this game because the Kings were without Garrett Temple. They were without Ty Lawson as well. And yeah, McLemore has started 3 of the last 4 games. But he took full advantage of this starting role. He played 42 minutes and scored 22 points. And it didn't come on 60% shooting. It came on a nice 47% night. But what he did in the other areas is what really helped him out. 6 triples, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, and 4 steals from McLemore. McLemore is a player that I did have some faith in. George Karl ruined a lot of that faith last season by having zero faith in McLemore himself. But McLemore was trending upwards until last season. Jaeger hasn't given him too much of a shake this year. But in the last 4 games, he's averaging 29 minutes a game, 13 points, 2.5 threes, 3 rebounds, 2 steals, shooting 44 and 83. They're good numbers. They're 12-team numbers. Do I think that Ben McLemore can stick as a 12-team guy? Well, I'll tell you one thing. He's better than Aaron Aflalo. And my core theory, I guess is the right word to say it, is if you're looking at players to who do I take a flyer on, who's in front of him? That's the question you should ask. Is it a steaming pile of shit? Then there's a chance that he jumps over them. Aaron Aflalo, Garrett Temple, like these players aren't good. So if McLemore continues to play well and play consistently well, there's a role for him there. And he is a very good rebounder. We saw that today. He's a very aggressive rebounder for his position. He can hit some threes. He's getting some steals now, which seems just a little bit fluky, but it's not too bad. And he can score a bit. So he's not a 12-team league guy at the moment. He's a guy you grab in deeper leagues. And if Lawson remains out, yeah, you stream him in 12s. And you see where that leads. But streaming is a streaming position. Don't drop someone who's got guaranteed top 100 value because I've got to get McLemore on for these 3 games. Or however many games that Lawson's going to be out, which we don't know yet. Lawson could be back for the next game. I think that he misses a few more, though, Ty. But really encouraging performance from Ben here. Going to be really interesting to see what they do with him. Trade deadline. Don't think they move him, just given the paucity of guards in Sacramento. But in terms of his restricted free agency coming up in the offseason, it's going to be really interesting to see what actually goes down with Benny Mac there. The waiver, not that waiver, that was the waiver. Let's talk young gun of the night, and I don't need to talk too much about Nikola Jokic because we know that he is
pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yep. Career high for Jokic, 40 points, 2 triples, 9 rebounds, 5 assists and 2 steals on a blistering 17 of 23 from the field and 4 of 5 from the line. I don't need to talk about him too much. He is, in the last month, the 7th ranked player, averaging 31 minutes a night. Unfortunately, the last 2 weeks, he's down to 29 minutes, and that's pushing him to the top 20 zone. Still averaging 20.5, 8.5, 6, with 1.5 threes on 59 and 90. So still ludicrous numbers, but it's just not in the bigger amount of minutes that we'd like to see from Jokic. And some of that was foul trouble, and some of that was... There was a blowout against the Spurs when the starters didn't play for basically the entire second half. And that's what's really limited his production the last couple of games. Also, the last week. His last 2 games have been big on the minutes. And if there are no foul troubles or no tomfoolery from Mick Malone, then we're going to see 33 of a night of Jokic, and he's going to put up more of these numbers. Really good stuff from Nick. Going to be super interested to see what happens with him next season in drafts. Someone will take a flyer on him in a lot of situations in the first round. You're going to have guys like Embiid in that zone as well. It's going to be a real mess of players between 8 and 16, and you'll be able to get a first-round caliber type of player in the early second round. So it might even be the case that taking those late first-round picks works out to your benefit rather than, say, a pick 5, getting like a pick 10 or 11 and getting 2 of these guys. Might end up being the better strategy, which is actually what it was this season, I believed as well. If you pick towards that end of the first round, it was a little bit better than picking in the middle, but it is going to be, we're obviously a long way away from that, a lot of water to go under the bridge, but yeah, great stuff from Nikola Jokic. The dud of the night. You know what? It wasn't easy to come up with a dud of the night for Friday because nearly everyone who was owned in most leagues performed. The worst one of those players who's owned in all leagues was Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, but it was far from a stinker. 10 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists with 1 steal on 5 of 12 shooting. Just have to, for completeness sake, just give the dud of the night out. But it does give me an opportunity to highlight that KCP's been struggling. He's outside the top 150 for the last month because he's scoring just 11 points per game on 35% shooting. That's really, really dipping. The steals are there. That's fine. The rebounds are the same. The assists are the same, which are well up on last season. But the shooting is well down. He's at 1.5 threes and 11 points, where for the season he's at 14 and 2. Because he's shooting 7% or 6% under his season-long numbers. If he gets dropped to a waiver wire, I don't believe he's going to continue to shoot at 35%. It will come back up, therefore his scoring will come back up, therefore his threes will come back up. So you get a boost in 3 categories there while everything else will remain constant. So if he gets dropped, I would do it. But I am going to be really cautious about this field goal percentage and about the fact that it could really hurt me, and it's been a real harm over the last month. But I do believe that KCP will be better than this. We've seen plenty of... He's not a great shooter, but he's also not one of the worst shooters in the NBA. So that is going to have to turn around for KCP, and it will involve turning around of 3 categories once the shot starts falling. So that's something to look forward to with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope moving forward. All right, let's head in to talk about these games now in a little bit of extra detail as we like to do at this time on the show. There were 9 games on Friday, so let's take it away by starting off with the Miami Heat and the Brooklyn Nets. Yes, James Johnson was monstrous again. At this point, you have to consider James Johnson in the race for the 6th Man of the Year. I know the 6th Man of the Year voters really just want to give the metaphorical blowjob to anybody who scores points. But Johnson has been tremendous as a 6th man for this team, initiating offense, doing defensive things, scoring when need be. He played 35 minutes against the Nets as the Heat marched to their 13th consecutive victory. They're 1 game out of the 8th seed now. They could be doing themselves a huge, huge disservice to this franchise long term. And I know that sounds stupid because they are crushing it, but they could have been a top 3, top 4 pick. And what are they going to do now? Get themselves the 14th pick? They could have been in a really, really nice position. But the players are fighting super hard. Jim, 26 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 3 blocks, 65% shooting, hit all 4 of his free throws. He's as must-own as they come. It really frustrates me when Spoelstra goes out there and only plays him 20 minutes. There is literally no excuse for that ever, given the melange of crapness that he has at the power forward position. Johnson should be out there for 30 minutes every single night. Great stuff from him here, though. Scooter Magruder, 35 minutes, 11, 6, and 3 with 4 steals. That's a couple of strong games from Magruder in a row, but obviously it's without Dion Waiters and Joshy Richardson. Once those 2 blokes come back, it's going to be hard for Magruder to get the touches or to get the minutes that he's seeing. But for now, deeper leagues, you've got to be looking at Magruder, while Tyler Johnson bounced back after a couple of slow nights. 18 and 6 with 3 steals for Tyler there. Dragic had 21, and for the Hassan Whiteside owners who have been disappointing with his block output, he had 4 here. So at least he helps you. There wasn't a great night in the other zones for Hassan there. 31 minutes for Akaro White, 10 points with 5 rebounds for Whitey. Really not having much of an impact. And Luke Babbitt continues to start and also continues to be one of the worst starters in the entire NBA. Interestingly, that Akaro White took minutes off Will Reed and off Luke Babbitt in this game, as Reed played 9 minutes and Babbitt was just under 10. Akaro White played 31. So that's an interesting development. On to the Nets. Brookie Lopez with a huge block in this game. Ended up with 30 points in 31 minutes, 8 boards and 2 blocks in total. A really big night for him. And Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, the minutes roller coaster continues. Just the 23 minutes for Rondé. 30 minutes, 21 minutes, 21 minutes, 29 minutes, 22 minutes. He's just as up and down as anybody, and that really limits him from being an ownable player outside of, say, 16-team leagues, maybe 14-teamers. 5 and 6 with 3 assists and 2 steals makes you go, man, just give him 30 minutes. It'll be enough in 30 minutes. But it just feels like it's never going to happen. The same with Karis LeVert, who played 19 minutes and had 9 and 3. Love LeVert. You won't find many bigger fans. Maybe you'll find some other bigger fans than LeVert, but I've been talking about Levert for a very long time. You've got to be realistic about what's going to happen with him on this team. And yes, my number one tenant of fantasy basketball, who's ahead of him? Is it crap? Yes, it is, because it's Randy Foye. But also, who's the coach? What are they doing? How are they running things? Oh, they're not running things well. And Levert hasn't really started to outplay Randy Foye yet. So no need to be holding on to him. Bojan Bogdanovic went back to stinker mode, 10 points in 29 minutes for him, while Foye actually had a decent night, 15 points in 26 minutes, but I would have very little faith in holding on to him, really, in any sort of circumstance. Also, Shawnee Kilpatrick is under 20 minutes for the third consecutive game, 5 points in 16 minutes. Remember when he was the flavour of the month at the start of the year? That's clearly not the case anymore for Sean, so no need to be holding on to him in any 12s or 14s or maybe even 16-team leagues. All right, the Denver Nuggets and the New York Knickerbockers. Talked about Jokic already, but there were some other big performances from the Nuggets in this absolute offensive showcase from both teams. Really, 131, 123. The Nuggets get the victory. I'm not going to dwell too much on the Knicks' PR disaster that is James Dolan, but you all have heard about the absolute ludicrity, which is a made-up word for me saying ludicrousness of the stuff that comes out of Dolan's mouth and his press releases. Let's talk Nuggets. Wilson Chandler, another big game, contributing everywhere. 19-4 with 2 steals and 2 blocks, and that's because the Rooster's out, Ken Fareed is out, so Chandler's getting a lot more run. They didn't start farting Will Barton with Fareed out. They went with Darrell Arthur, who, honestly, Darrell Arthur, I don't know where this is coming from. He's shooting 51% from 3 this season on 3 attempts per game. So it's not talking tiny sample size, but he hit another 3 here on 6 attempts. He just continues to hit 3s at a crazy rate. Only played the 21 minutes, so that limits his usefulness, but deeper leagues need to look at him. As for Barton, he played 34 off the bench and had 15 and 10 with 4 assists and 2 blocks. Great counting stats, horrendous percentages as he went 40 from the field and 50 from the line. But Barton, whilst the Rooster is out and Ken Fareed is out, but mainly the Rooster, Barton's going to have value. Once they come back, he'll go back to a 24-minute role. Gaz Harris played 34, 16 and 7 with 3 triples. Gaz is available in leagues, and he shouldn't be. I'm a big Gaz fan. While Jameer Nelson had a return to form after some pretty piddling performances. 36 minutes for Jameer, 16, 4 and 12 with 4 triples. He only has value while Manny Moutier is out. And when Moutier comes back, he'll probably only play 21, 22 minutes a game for the first bit. But that limits Nelson down to, say, 28 minutes. And that makes him not a useful player. Don't expect 60% shooting from 16 points for Jameer all that often. If you do add him, you're adding him strictly for his assist numbers. For the Knicks, Melo was great, 33, 6 and 4 with 2 steals on 65% shooting. And the Knicks finally started my boy at center.
Excellent!
He wasn't great, but he wasn't terrible. Now, there's a lot of tweets going around, comparing Porzingis to Jokic, and understandable with these two guys. Now, if you could go back and listen to things that I said last season, I picked Jokic for second in Rookie of the Year behind Karl Anthony Towns. I believe that Jokic is a better player than Porzingis, but I don't think that this head-to-head matchup means that Porzingis is terrible. It was still a decent night from him, 17 and 4 with 2 threes, a steal and a block. I just don't think that he is the player that Jokic is, and I don't think he's got the ceiling necessarily of Jokic either, but he's still going to be a very good player, and he's going to be a top 20, potentially top 10 fantasy guy very, very soon. So they started Porzingis. They put Brandon Jennings into the starting lineup and played him a whopping 39 minutes for Jennings. Just the 6 points on 2 of 10 shooting, but he did give 13 assists. I've been talking about this for months and months. Jennings can have value in standard leagues for his assists. Even in the 25 minutes, getting 5 assists a game is useful, but you've got to be ready to punt field goal percentage. In a starter's role, if he's playing 30 minutes, then those assists become even more valuable. Now, 13 is obviously a high point, and he can get steals and he can hit threes as well. But be aware of your field goal percentage. But no problem in taking a punt if you just really want to solidify that assists category. As for Derrick Rose, he's never going to get assists. 13, 3 and 4 for Derrick in 28 minutes. And Courtney Lee had 15 with 4 assists and 2 steals. A good Courtney Lee night, but leave him for the 14-teamers. So, starting Porzingis at center, what does that mean for everybody's... one of everyone's favorite Spanish centers, Bill Hernangomez? The Jeff Hornacek center rotational choose your own adventure was back in vogue today.
My name is Jeff.
9 minutes for Bill. 9. Yes, he was playing more minutes when Joakim Noah was healthy. 9 minutes, 12 and 4, so it wasn't like he played poorly. I'm never going to understand it. I never will. I still think that Kyle O'Quinn is the better player, and Hornacek has gone without the last couple of games. But being able to predict it is almost impossible. O'Quinn, 16 and 6, 3 assists and 4 blocks in 22 minutes was really good. O'Quinn to me is a 14-team staple. He should be owned in all those leagues. Hernan Gomez absolutely was the right move to pick him up in 12s. It's probably the right move to move on from him now. With Noah coming back, with him going more Porzingis at center, and with the fluid nature, if I'm going to be going to use media speak, the fluid nature of Hornacek's rotations, you can't rely on Bill to play 25 a night, which is what he would need to be a useful player in that sort of a situation. All right, let's go on to the next game. The San Antonio Spurs and the Detroit Pistons. Wayne Dedmon. 32 minutes for Dedmon, 17 and 17, 1 steal and 2 blocks on 80% shooting. This is how I think that they should have attacked the Pau Gasol injury from the start. I don't know more than Greg Popovich at all. And he went with David Lee. And then he rotated them, and now he looks like he's stuck with Dedmon. Now, Gasol's probably only going to miss 3 more games. He's with them on this road trip, but he's not going to return until after the All-Star break. But with Dedmon's minutes creeping up, with production being fantastic, in a 14-team league, he's probably a guy you grab. In a 12, I'm not sure, but I also wouldn't rule out Dedmon continuing to start for the rest of the season. It's a very, very, very low chance, very like single-digit percentage chance that he continues to start. But even to me, back in the preseason, starting Aldridge and Dedmon together was the most common sense pairing for the Spurs. Play Gasol in a 22-minute bench roll, 23-minute bench roll, come on, Enes Kanter-like, score 18 points, grab 8 rebounds, block 2 shots, and do it in 22, 23 minutes. Preserve his body, destroy opposition bench units. But they didn't go with that. Dedmon's not going to get 32 minutes when Powell returns. He's probably not going to get 26 minutes when Powell returns. But it is interesting to see the way that he's playing and the way that the unit looks together with him. Kawhi had 32, 6, and 5, while LaMarcus Aldridge had 19 and 11 with a pair of blocks in his 32 minutes, and Dan Green drilled 4 triples for his 12 points. Really tough to me to own Dan in majority of 12-team cases. Now, Dave Lee played the 20 minutes, which is more than he's been playing recently, 11 and 7 with 2 assists. If you did grab him in a 12-team league, you can move on, which I'm sure you already have. Well, Tone Parker played 31 minutes and had 2 points, but dished 12 assists. Tone is more a 14-team point guard, while Pat Mills, 2 points, 5 assists in 16 minutes for Pat. And oddly enough, DeJounte Murray not in the rotation at all, while Bryn Forbes played 42 seconds. Not really sure why DeJounte Murray... Actually, he might not have been with the team. I should have checked that. For the Pistons, Reggie Jackson got his minutes back. 29 minutes for Reggie, and that is his minutes. He's not a 35-minute guy. He's not a 34-minute guy. He's barely a 30-minute guy, to be honest. But this is him. 12 points, 2 threes, 7 assists, and 1 steal. So that, if you're an owner of Reggie, you should breathe somewhat of a sigh of relief. I'm just thinking about this now. In the Fantrax Cash League that we played, the Play Josh Lloyd League, which I own Reggie Jackson, is what triggered it, I realized that I had on that team, and I was sitting in first, and then I lost Zach LaVine and Jabari Parker, so I'm probably going to be kissing that cash goodbye. El Toro has now jumped me for first in that Roto League, so El Toro, I reckon you got it in the bag now after losing both LaVine and Parker. It's going to be tough for me to come back in that league, but for some reason that just triggered me off to remember that. Yeah, good night from Reggie, but Ish was still good. 19 minutes for Smith, 15, 3, and 4 with 2 blocks. Much like Jennings, if you need assists, Smith can help. But it is probably more of a 14-team, streaming 12-team situation. Toby Harris owners can be a little bit relieved. He played 33 minutes and scored 16 after a little bit of a slump from him. And Marcus Morris, this is the Marcus Morris we know and love. 29 minutes for Marcus, 10 points with 5 rebounds. He is as up and down as they come. While Andre Drummond had 12 and 15 with 3 steals and a block in 37 minutes. Horrible percentages from Drummond. Horrible. 29%. If you said Andre Drummond shot 29%, you go, yeah, okay, that's fine. And then you said from the field, you go, what? 29 from the field? From the line, yeah, understand. 29 from the field is horrific for a guy like that. While the tackle box, John Lua played 35 minutes and had 10 points. Not a 12-team league guy, in my opinion, for the tackle box, John Lua. The Pelicans and the Timberwolves, Anthony Davis, ridiculous, 42 and 13, 2 threes, a steal, a block, 73% shooting from the field, 73% shooting from the line. Just a ludicrous performance from Davis. Thankfully, he hasn't missed any time recently, hasn't left games, and has been putting up stupid numbers, as has his point guard. Drew Holiday went very, very close to being the monstrous line of the night tonight. There was a couple of other contributors, or a couple of other guys who were close. But Drew, with a 25, 6, and 12 line, 1, 3, 5 steals, perfect 4 of 4 from the line, and 71% from the field, is a stupidly good line. Drew is a top 20 player. He's not playing over his head to be a top 20 player. He is this good. And if you did invest in him, it was some rough stuff early in the season, but it's clearly paying off in 2017. No Terrence Jones, no Etuan Moore, no Tyreek Evans, all out of this game. So Bud Hield, he stepped up and scored 17 points on 70% shooting as well. In fact, the Pelicans as a team shot 60% from the field, and that caused them to get a very, very big victory on the road. Now, Bud scored 17. He had 4 rebounds. He just does nothing else. I am not convinced that Buddy Hield is a starting quality player in the NBA, or will he ever become a starting quality player in the NBA, or will he ever become a consistent top 100 fantasy player? I have no faith in him whatsoever. Solly Hill does nothing. Although a 1-1 with 7, 6, and 7 is not terrible, it's a little bit out of the box for him though. Well, Dante Cunningham stepped into Jonesy's spot and had 12 and 4 in 38 minutes. Him and Hill are obviously just the very deep league players. Omer Ashik was impressive, 4 fouls in 4 minutes. That is all Omer Ashik is good for. On the Wolves, Karl Anthony Towns, 36 and 8, another stupid performance from him, while Andy Wiggins had 29 and 4 with 3 steals and a triple on 65% shooting. See, I told you, there's just ridiculous numbers all across the entire NBA. Wiggo in the last couple of games is showing us, yes, he can be a top 30 player. Yes, he can be. Now, all it comes down to is consistency. Can he consistently do it? Can he consistently shoot at a high level, score, get some defensive numbers, rebound, and assist? That's what he needs to do. And he can do it. He just needs to do it consistently. After the last game where Tom Thibodeau decided it was a good idea to play Lance Stevenson and Tyus Jones as his clutch backcourt, Rick Rubio went back and played 39 minutes and had 15 with 12 assists and 4 steals. That's just what Thibodeau does sometimes. He'll just, whatever reason it is, we're just going to run with I should use the Thibodeau voice if I could do it. I'm not gravelly enough. We're just going to run with Rubio down, with Stevenson and Jones down the stretch. This is my Thibodeau Australian accent. And I thought they were giving us good energy. And then he just goes back to Rubio. So when that happens, don't panic about Rick. Now, we had everyone back. Chrissy Dunn was back. So everyone's there. So let's see how the Zach LaVine minutes panned out. As it turns out, in nearly every case across the NBA, no one is a winner when someone gets injured. No one, because they just spread the minutes out. Brandon Rush started. He played 25 minutes, the most minutes, and probably was his most productive performance. 9 points with 2 triples for Rushy. You're more going to be a 16-team league guy. Dunn played 9 minutes. Tyus Jones played 10 minutes. But by the way, Dunn scored 0 points and had 1 assist and 1 steal. Tyus Jones played 10 minutes and had 1 point and 2 assists. I will continue to maintain that Jones is better than Dunn. Lance Stevenson had 1 point in 12 minutes and was horrific. And Shabazz Muhammad had 5 points in his 22 minutes. So, is this indicative of what happens moving forward? I don't think it's completely indicative, but I'm still fairly confident that Rush is the player that gets the majority of the minutes here. And spuds like Stevenson, he probably won't even get a second 10-dayer, or he won't get a long-term contract, I don't think anyway. And Jones and Dunn will continue to get the scraps, and it won't be enough to really own any of them in standard league formats. And that's going to be the case nearly all the time when someone gets injured. We'll see this because of the depth in the NBA. It'll just get spread out, and streaming in fantasy leagues then becomes all the more important. The next game, the Indiana Pacers and the Washington Wizards. Kevin Seraphin, my boy, the first NBA player to follow me on Twitter. That's why, but even before that, he has a special place in my heart, because I do think that he has been horrendously underused in his career. In Washington, I hated the way they used him. In New York, it was criminal that he just couldn't get on the court. And I like the fact that they are starting to play him over Al Jefferson. 25 minutes here for Seraphin, 16 and 7 with 2 blocks. 80% shooting is obviously the outlier. But this was a game without Thaddeus Young as well. So Seraphin, big night from him, but don't get super excited. But deeper leagues, let's see if he can maintain this role over Al Jefferson, which is something I think he can do. Lavoy Allen started again in place of Young, 10 and 5 in 23 minutes for Lavoy. It really dropped off these last couple of games. Probably not worth dealing with him in a 12er. While Paulie George had 31 and 4 on 52% shooting. And Miles Turner's been a little bit down lately. 31 minutes for Turner, 10, 7 and 3 with a block. And they're still okay numbers, but they're not the guy that was pushing top 25 earlier in the season. He has faded a little bit. Jeffy Teague had 13, 4 and 9 as well.
My name is Jeff.
Monte Ellis played 28 minutes, had 8 assists, so that's great. 8 points. He's getting some extra playing time here with Thad out, and with CJ Miles being horrendous, and Glenn Robinson with a stinker as well, but not enough for him to get anywhere back into our 12-team collective thought process. The Lakers and the Bucks, the Lakers smacked them. 122 to 114 for the Lakers over the Bucks. Uncle P was on fire, didn't miss a shot for his first 9 shots, I believe. 8 shots, I think it was. Ended with 29 minutes and 26 points, including 5 triples, 4 assists, and 2 steals. Despite this hot shooting night, I don't think that Young is 100% a must-own player. Yes, he's good for scoring occasionally, but his minutes are going to be up and down, his scoring is going to be up and down, and he's really a streaming option at best. Lou Williams, 19 minutes. Don't be shocked if this is what Lou plays the remainder of the year. He can be still useful. He's not a drop guy at all. But 21 points with 2 assists and 3 triples is a good night. And it was great to see D'Angelo Russell getting back into it a little bit more. 27 for D'Angelo, 14 points with 5 assists and 4 triples. Tariq Black started once again at center. 20 minutes for Tariq, 7 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 blocks with a steal. Some nice numbers, but he, again, was the third fiddle in terms of minutes at that position, with Larry Nance playing 28 minutes and Ivica Zubats playing 21. I still think that Zubats will start for this team. I think it won't happen until mid-February if they put him above Black. Now, it's not like Black is an old player, but to me, Black is what he is. He is a backup center who can give you energy minutes. Zubats has the ability to be a starter. Stashing him, fine. I just think you're going to be waiting a few weeks for it to actually come to fruition, and that won't be something that can be held off for most teams. Now, Zubac was great here. 21 minutes, 15 and 6, 2 assists, 1 block, 64% shooting. You know I think the world of this guy, and I think he can be a very, very useful player in the NBA and fantasy piece, but it's about consistency of minutes. Larry Nance, who's played almost 30 minutes in 3 of the last 4 games, played 28 here, 11, 5, and 3. A nice performance from Nance, and as I've said before, I think if Nance gets 27 and 9, he's going to be a must-own player, and it's looking like it is creeping towards that for him. Geordie Clarkson had just 11 in 17 minutes. He's not a 10-teamer to me. He's at 12, while Julius Randle was not ideal, especially with the shooting, 15 and 7 on 3 of 6 from the line. Also, speaking of not ideal, Brandon Ingram. This guy is not a good shooter. He might become a good shooter. He is the furthest thing from a good shooter at this point. 2 points for Ingram in 20 minutes, 2 rebounds. A long way from being a top 100 player. Absolutely worth considering as just someone to hold for the time being until All-Star and still see what shakes out. And he will start the rest of the way. There's no doubt about that. But at this point, he's just not good. For the Bucks, always interesting to see what teams will do after a big injury and how they fill that hole. With Jabari Parker out for the season, there was the open starting power forward slot. So what did Big Jace decide to do? Well, first of all, he decided to get smacked by the Lakers and allow 47 points in the first quarter. So good on you, Jace. You're going to have a job for a long time. Who did he start? He started Thon Maker. And then he played him 3 minutes for about the first 3 quarters, and eventually Maker came in at the end and played 17. Now, 3 of Jason Kidd's starters played under 20 minutes. 4 of the players who we thought were going to be able to take some of Jabari's minutes played under 20. Thon, John, Mirza, and Greggy Munro. 19 minutes for Munro, 17 for Maker, 16 for Henson, 19 for Teletovic. And then Mick Beasley played 23 with 15 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists. All it adds up to is Beasley standard league. No. Henson standard league. Maybe. But this is such a... And this always... It makes me laugh. I love seeing patterns in what coaches do and then them proving me out. Let's play John Henson. 30 minutes. Oh, look at this performance. Great. 30 minutes. Oh, he's actually shit. 28 minutes. Okay, John, what's going on? 24 minutes. 22 minutes. 18 minutes. John, just the 16 minutes for you today. And then he'll be out of the rotation. And it's just a constant pattern. And they'll go, and then Jason Kidd looks around. I get this is the way I envisage it in my head. Is I see Jason Kidd looking down the bench or in practice and going, who's this kid? He's got long arms. What's your name, mate? My name's John Henson. John, really? You look like you could be a starting centre. How about you start for us? Go out there and play. I feel like Jason Kidd has never seen these guys play before and then puts them in and goes, yeah, okay, that didn't work. And then tries the same thing again in 2 months' time. And then it's just a gradual decrease in minutes until he goes, yeah, it didn't work. And then goes back to it again. Did it with Miles Plumlee. Did it with John Henson. He's done it over the course of his career. He's going to do it with Spencer Hawes. He's going to do it with Roy Hibbert. And he's going to continue to just screw things up. The overall outcome is nobody wins from Jabari Parker going down. Munro somehow losing Miles Plumlee, not putting in the backup centres you got back in a trade, losing your starting power forward has meant Greg Munro has played less minutes. Work the logic out on that because I cannot. I'm still holding Greg. I'm still holding John for the time being, maybe in certain 12-team situations. I'm not grabbing Mirza. I'm grabbing Mick Beasley in deeper type formats, or he's really just a point streamer guy. And Thon's the guy with the best upside here. No, that's not true, Munro. But he's just not going to play enough minutes. So all in all, you're shit out of luck. Nothing concrete is going to happen with this team. It's going to be a mess from night to night. They're not making the playoffs. They're a disaster. They started a starting lineup with one person who can score. Dellavedova, Snell, Yanni, Maker, and Henson. Like one player who's an offensive threat. And you would think, I'm going on about the Bucks a lot. You would think if you're starting a starting five with one offensive threat, that your defense would then be strong. But then you give up 47 points to the Lakers in the first quarter. And you probably have to reassess that thought process. So changes are going to come. Now, what I like is Malcolm Brogdon played 27 minutes. Broggo should never have lost his starting role. He had 18 points with 3 assists and a steal. You need to still hold on to him. While Chrissy Middleton had 6 assists and 3 steals in 21 minutes. They did say, I believe, before the game that he'd be limited to 16 minutes, so he played 21, of course, but he will miss Saturday's game due to it being a back-to-back, and it's going to be a slow process for Middleton, and as they continually get their asses kicked, he is not going to push it. I would be stunned if they allowed him to push it. All in all, just a complete mess in Milwaukee. They are struggling. All right, the Golden State Warriors and the Memphis Grizzlies. We talked about Draymond already. Clay had a big night, 36 points, including 8 triples and sweet FA apart from that. While Andre Iguodala, I think you'd all be stunned to know that Iggy is a top 80 player over the last month. It's coming because he's shooting 58% from the field, which we know is not realistic, and he is a punt points guy. But what he is he's basically a neutral in every category apart from being a negative in points and a big positive in field goal percentage. So this is when I talk about rankings. Yeah, 75. It makes you have a look at him and go, all right, he deserves my attention. But how does it help you? Is someone coming in and basically just providing marginally below average in every category apart from an unsustainable field goal percentage? It gives him that ranking, but does it actually help? There's no greens, big greens and reds. It's all just whites in his value column on Basketball Monster. In saying that, huge game from him. 22 points with 4 assists, 1 steal and 2 blocks. Magnificent. But I wouldn't be suggesting him as a 10-teamer or even a 12-team league guy in most cases. Kevin Durant had 24 points and Steph had 18, 4 and 5 in his 35 minutes. JaVale McGee's bruised ass was fine, so he played 18. and had 4 and 4. Onto the Grizzlies. Zebo was back 25 minutes off the bench, 17 and 13. That's what he does, double-doubles. He helps you in rebounds, not much else, but can be owned. I wouldn't strike him as a must-own guy while Chandler Parsons rested. So Jim Ennis started, and it was a subpar performance from Jim. 10 points with 1 rebound and 1 steal, and gone are the days where he was a must-own player while Parsons was out. That's not the case anymore. Mick Conley had 20 points with 9 assists and 3 steals, while Marc Gasol, pretty solid night, especially when you're going up against the Warriors, but 29% shooting's horrific. 17, 6 and 7 with a 111 is not a bad night, while Tone Allen had 15 and 9 and got a steal and a block. Tone's puts up these occasional nights, then puts up the stinker, making him a really tough guy to hold on to in most cases. Speaking of not holding on to, JaMychal Green is not a player that you should hold on to in standard 12-team fantasy leagues. The Atlanta Hawks and the Sacramento Kings, really good game in this one. The interaction between the Hawks and Kings Twitter feeds was hilarious after the NBA said that team Twitter accounts can't be disrespectful. I don't think that was the word they used, but something along those lines. Yeah, they can't be condescending or disrespectful to other teams. So these two accounts were just going back and forth at each other, basically just patting each other on the back. Good job there, guys. I'm sure you guys will come back. Keep your chin up. It was a tough first quarter. You're better than that. It was hilarious. They were clearly taking the piss out of the NBA, and just go back and read the Kings and Hawks Twitter interaction. Very, very humorous. Paulie Millsap had a nice game, as all power forwards do against the Kings. 25, 6 and 3 with 2 steals and 2 triples. While Timmy Hardaway Jr., is he good now? I don't know. He can be good, but he's not always good. But 28 points in 36 minutes with 4 rebounds and 3 threes is good. But every time he has a good night, it's because he shoots at a stupid rate. 53% from the field for his 28 points. And then he's just as likely to be 43% and have 10 points. He just doesn't do enough in the other areas, even though he's upped his ball handling and his assist rate this year, which has been impressive. And while Tarbo's out, he's fine to own. But his ceiling is just so limited by his inability to contribute in other areas. Dennis Schroeder had 20 and 6, while Kent Bazemore had a nice, well-rounded 12, 6 and 2 line with 3 blocks. Dwight Howard had 6 and 11, but he got boogied in this game. Not much happening on the bench. DeAndre Bembry played more minutes than anyone on the bench, which is such a great sign to me. Really like Bembry. He's not doing much with it. Still yet to hit a 3, but 2 assists, 1 steal, and 1 block. That's where he can help. The assist numbers, the steal numbers, and can be a useful player, but he's still got a long way to go. On to the Kings, big Dazza Collison, 44 minutes for Daz with Ty Lawson out, 22, 3 and 4, 2 steals and 2 triples, 50% shooting. He's in gear at the moment now. He's still going to be subject to the Dave Yeager point guard carousel, but he feels fairly solid at the moment. Matty Barnes struggled 5, 4 and 5, 2 steals and a block. Absolutely fine to continue the ownership of him, while Tony Tolliver dropped in 5 triples for the entirety of his 15 points. Boogie was an absolute nightmare with your percentages. 35% on 17 attempts from the field, 62% on 13 attempts from the line, just obliterating those categories. But 22, 11 and 7 with 2 steals and a block really gets the counting stats going. And I talked about Ben McLemore and what's in front of him for. Well, let's check in on who was in front of him, because Aaron Aflalo played 29 minutes and had 8 points with 2 assists, and he remains a very, very poor player. Speaking of very poor, let's talk about the Chicago Bulls. They headed to the Phoenix to take on the Suns, and the Suns not only got a victory, but they smacked the Bulls down. The Bulls had Dwayne Wade back. The Bulls had Jimmy Butler back, but it didn't matter. Wade had 18, 6 and 3 with 2 blocks. Butler had 23 and 6 with 2 steals. Both guys shot poorly. So, of course, with those players back, Michael Carter-Williams, who had been your best point guard, with those guys out, he was banished to the bench and he played 8 minutes, less than Rajon Rondo, who played 23, and started Jeremy Grant, who played 21. These point guards are an absolute mess. There is no reason, I'll continue to say it, Michael Carter-Williams should never have been benched, and he should definitely not be third string. It is ludicrous at this point, the way that the Bulls are running things. Taj Gibson was piss poor, 10 and 6 in 26 minutes, while Nick Mirotic had a 111, and that's about the most positive thing I can say for the Bulls. On to the Suns. There was no Alex Len. He was suspended by the NBA. Then Tyson Chandler went down with an ankle injury after 12 minutes. So enter big Allen Williams. 14 and 11 for Williams with 4 blocks. We've seen it before from him. When he plays, the stats will come. Great. Now, if Tyson misses time, it's going to be Alex Len that plays the bulk of the minutes. But you deeper league guys, go grab Big Sauce. Go at him. Even if he gets 20 minutes, he'll be useful in 20-team leagues whilst Tyson is out. Devin Booker had a super efficient 27-point night, 62% true shooting. He was 53 from the field, 83 from the line, added 5 rebounds and 4 assists. So a really good night from Devin, while TJ Warren played 37 minutes and had 16 and 5 with 2 blocks. At this point, we just never know what we're going to get from TJ, but it is definitely trending in the right direction, while PJ Tucker is pretty much just a steal specialist. He had 3 of them here with 7 boards and 7 points in 33 minutes. But he's just getting these steals on a consistent basis. Now, Marquise Chris, in a game without Len, without Chandler, he managed just 22 minutes because, as usual, he was plagued by foul trouble. That is the thing that's holding him back from being a 12-team league player, while Eric Bledsoe bounced back after a couple of substandard games for 23, 3, and 8 on 47% shooting. All right. I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be back to preview all the action that we've got coming up on Saturday in the NBA for DFS. Alright guys, here we go. Let's talk perfect DFS lineups on Friday on FanDuel. Drew Holiday, 51.2, and Mick Conley at 43.5. The shooting guards, Yanni at 64.6, a guy that's been struggling to get value recently. He really bounced back. And Benny McLemore at 43.3. At small forward, a couple of real bargain guys here. Scooter Magruder at 29.7 and Andre Iguodala at 36.4. The power forwards, the big men, Nikola Jokic at 60.3 and Draymond Green at 61.4. And at center, my boy Dwayne Dedman at 40.4 for a total of 430.8. And that cost the full $60,000. On DraftKings, Drew at 58, Uncle P at 40.5, Yanni at 68, Draymond at 67.5, Nikola Jokic at 62.75, Benny Mac at 47.75, Iggy's at 37.5, and Dedman at 44.25 for a total of 426.25, and that also cost $50,000. I think it's the first time since I've been tracking this all season that both the FanDuel and DraftKings perfect lineup used every dollar of the salary. Maybe someone can recall another time that happening. I can't. I think that's the only time that that's happened all season. As I said, there are 8 games on Saturday. There is an early game, though. That is the Clippers and the Hornets, which starts at 5 p.m. Eastern, 9 o'clock Australian Eastern time. That is for you guys playing on Moneyball or Draft Stars. And I don't think that game is included on the Moneyball slate, but I think it is included on the Draft Star slate. Have a look on FanDuel and DraftKings as to whether this game is included in your contests as well. We don't know if Cody Zeller is playing. He left the last game, was unable to return with that quad soreness. They said there was no new re-injury, so that's good news, but we just have to wait and see whether he is playing. If he is out, it's about Frank the Tank Kaminsky who comes in, and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist gets a bump in his minutes as well, which should enable him to be maybe a decently valuable player. But Frank the Tank's the guy that you'd want to be targeting. At point guard, Kemba Walker is at $7,300. So the salary continues to drop for Kemba. It's not at a high rate now. He's at $7,500 on DraftKings, which is obviously higher. At $7,300 against a Clippers team who is without Chris Paul. So they're still a decent defensively, but not as much recently. They've been giving up a lot of points to point guards recently. Kemba's in a good spot here at $7,300. He's been fluky. He's been up, and by fluky, I don't mean that he's been doing it by he's not that good and it's a fluke. I just mean that trying to predict when the performance is, you just don't know when Kemba's going to put up the big one. But I think that he is, I think he's worth looking at in this matchup here. The Clippers, we don't know what they're going to do. Last game they started they didn't. They started Luke Marmute and they pushed Ray Felton back to the bench and limited him to 20 minutes. Now I don't know if that was to match up with Carmelo Anthony and whether they'll put Ray Felton out there in a matchup against Kidd-Gilchrist or Batum. How they run that, I'm not sure, but it is worth monitoring. Felton comes in at 4,600, has struggled to get to that sort of value recently anyway, so I don't think he'd be a strong play, while Austin Rivers is at 5,700, just feels a little bit too high, but absolutely in a positive matchup for Rivers, he has GPP upside, because going up against the Hornets is one of the best things for opposition point guards. So Rivers gets the bump in that sort of a scenario. I like JJ Redick as a shooting guard at 4,700. He hasn't been doing much. He's averaging just 17.5 points over the last 3 games, but the matchup is a super positive one. He's got a decent record against the Hornets. If we can talk about homecomings, and JJ goes back to North Carolina where he played college, does that help him at all? I don't think that's something you should be reading too much into, but at 4,700, there's not many cheap shooting guards with the upside of Redick, so I would be looking at him as a GPP play in a good matchup for JJ here. As for Batum on the other side, 7,500 for Nick. Just solid, really rock solid. 39 points in the last game. You're going to get around 33 to 34 out of Batum on most nights. He comes in at 77 on DraftKings, which I'm not so in love with. It's not bad, but it's not fantastic. He's got a good record against the Clippers, so Batum is decently solid without being a foundational piece of a roster. Jamal Crawford's also playing well, but he's at 5,100, so it does limit the possibilities a little bit with him, but I've loved what he's done recently, so I wouldn't have any concern with throwing him into a GPP. In fact, you'd even have to consider looking at Jamal in cash, because out of the last 6 games he's played, he's reached 5x value based on his salary 5 times. Now, the salary has jumped a little bit, so that clouds that somewhat, but Crawford has some value. Small forwards, not really much to talk about. We can look at Kid Gilchrist, who had 31 in the last game. If Zeller is out, I would GPP him, but that's really it. And even then, he's not a strong play. Mo Spates comes in at 3,800 and 35 on DraftKings. Super matchup for Maurice Spates. He hasn't done a huge amount lately, but we know that he is a guy that can get hot. And he absolutely is a GPP play to me. More so on DraftKings, where he's got a good record against Charlotte, and his price is a little bit cheaper, and the scoring system suits him a little bit more. I would be okay with considering Mo Spates in that sort of a spot. Marvin Williams at 5,400. I've liked what Marvin has done recently, but at 5,400 maybe feels a little bit high. 49 on DraftKings, fine. I feel pretty good about him getting 5x at least over there. Majority of the time, with that sort of a price tag, he has been playing at a much elevated rate. In fact, he's averaging 32 points in the last 3 over on DraftKings as well. Big Marv Williams. Frank the Tank, as I said, Zeller's out. He's in. 9,700 for Blake Griffin. Really putting up some good numbers. He's got a decent matchup here, but that's a big price. He has been averaging it. 49-point average over his last 5. I would have no issue with considering Blake Griffin here. I think it's fine. It is a hefty price tag, but it's not too hefty to totally dissuade me. He's at 95 over on DraftKings as well. For the centers, Cody Zeller's at 5,200. Really tough to rely upon him at this point. And DeAndre Jordan at 7,700. Good matchup for DeAndre. I'm not sure how much faith I put in him, though. And I am sure that the amount of faith I put in him is very little. So I'd look at him as just a GPP type of a play at this point in proceedings. Let's move on to the second game now. The good old Milwaukee Bucks, they take on the Indiana Pacers. We don't know if Thaddeus Young is going to play for the Pacers, so that would open up more minutes for Kevin Seraphin and for Lavoy Allen. Allen's minutes in the low 20s the last couple of games have not worked out all that well for DFS. Would you still take a flyer on him? You could consider it. Is it 3,800 on FanDuel, so you're not talking about a huge price tag to use him, and he's at 38 on DraftKings as well. But the reliability of him on cash is fairly much reduced at the moment. The point guards, we've got Malcolm Brogdon at 5,100. I have no confidence in Brogdon, not as a player, in his minutes. That's what I don't have confidence in, and that salary is just a little bit too high. While the other point guard is Matty Dellavedova, who's at 4,200 and is averaging under 10 points in the last 3. Getting under 20 minutes in those games as well. I wouldn't want to be using Daly in that scenario, but it is a game that Chris Middleton is out of. He is resting, so someone is going to have to pick up the slack there. Tone Snell's going to get some of those minutes, but I think Daly and Brogo are going to have to get some of those, but it's also Jason Terry. There's also Rashad Vaughn in there. There's also Rashad Vaughn in there who could get some of that playing time too. Jeff Teague at 7,700 for the Indiana Pacers. It's a nightmare of a matchup going up against the Bucks for point guards. 7,300 for Teague over on DraftKings as well. Not a complete write-off, but definitely not something that I'm looking to be super pumped to include him into lineups at that sort of a salary. At shooting guard, Yanni is at 11,200. Had really struggled to get to value recently, but smashed through it in this game where he had, in Friday's game where he had 65 points, an absolute monster of a performance there from Antetokounmpo. I don't even know if I mentioned him in the game summary. I probably did. I probably didn't mention him. Well, I'll do it now because he had 41, 8, and 6 with 2 steals and 3 blocks. An absolutely ludicrous performance from Yanni. I think I went too much on in that part about talking about what Kidd was doing or what the plan was moving forward. But Yanni was ridiculous in that game. 41, 8, and 6 with 2 steals and 3 blocks. But at 11,200 on a back-to-back against Paul George, who likely to be guarding him for big chunks of this game, I don't think that that's a great investment. On DraftKings, he comes in at 10,500. Yeah, not bad. But I'm not locking him in. We'll leave it at that. Where else are we? Rod Stuckey, Monte Ellis, not much to see with those guys at small forward. Paulie George at 8,700. Love the matchup for George. A really, really positive one against the Bucks. Small forwards have been turning it on against them. He's at 81 on DraftKings. I think this is a big opportunity for him to go big, 45, 50-point big. Mick Beasley on the other side at 4,400. Actually returned some value to 23 points in 23 minutes in the last game. He's going to be relied upon a little bit more for scoring with Chris Middleton out as well. Don't hate a Mick Beasley GPP play. And at 4,200, Beasley comes in looking really nice on DraftKings as well. But it's not without its risks. CJ Miles is all risk, so I wouldn't be bothered too much with him. Mirza Teletovic, Glenn Robinson III, Tone Snell. I can't really see the appeal in any of those guys. At power forward, Thad Young, if he happens to play at 5,700, I reckon he'd be a nice tournament play because I think he'd be fairly under-owned. He's at 5,400 on DraftKings, 57 on FanDuel, and could easily break through that sort of a price point. But we need to know that he's playing first before we do that. And the other power forwards, I talked about Lavoie already. Thon Maker at minimum salary. Why not? Have a look at a GPP. Definitely got some GPP upside. Hit some threes, get some blocks, get 20 minutes. That could work. It's unlikely to work, but it could work. And at 3,000 on DraftKings, even more appealing at that low salary that he's at. The centers. Let's start with the Bucks centers. Johnny Henson, Greggy Munro. Henson is at 3,900, so still really cheap. I like the upside play of him. I feel relatively good about being able to use him. Now, on DraftKings at 4,100, I don't. I hate that price for him over there. But on FanDuel at 39, I do think that there's some use in that. Miles Turner, I said it earlier, he's been struggling. He's averaging just 25 over the last 5, but playing the Bucks as a big man, as a center, is a good way to get some numbers going. We saw Ivica Zubac do it today for the Lakers. Can Turner get it back at 6,400? I think it's absolutely worth having a look now on DraftKings, where he comes in at 5,800. That is super appealing. He's been struggling, but he's still averaging 26 points across the last 5. That's not far off value at that sort of a price tag. I think 5,800 in a matchup against the Bucks for Miles Turner really should work in his favor, but that's something that you can have a look at, and you can adjust it based on your level of your tolerance for risk, I guess. Let's move now on to the next game. Denver taking on the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs are favored by 12.5. It is a big spread. The total is 230 points for this game. Again, just a very, very big total. The Nuggets are on the road. They've got a horrific defense. They're on a back-to-back. It could get ugly pretty quickly. Now, there's a lot of injury situations we need to pay attention to. Iman Shumpert for the Cavs, who's missed the last couple with an ankle injury, and for the Nuggets, Ken Farid and Manny Mudiay are both questionable. I doubt that Mudiay plays. I think that Farid will be back. Farid, I think Farid plays. I think Mudiay misses, but we don't know at this point. So there's a lot of variables. If Farid is out, it's just a bump for Fart and Will Barton. It's a bump for Wilson Chandler as well. And if Mudiay is out, then Jameer Nelson comes into play. But his salary is not total dirt cheapness. If Shumpert is out, it changes nothing, really. Nobody really gets any sort of a bump. We have seen point guards against the Knicks generally have pretty big games. Brandon Jennings and Derrick Rose today were all right, but Jennings dished 13 assists. Rose scored 17 points. Not bad nights, but point guards in general against the Nuggets have gone off. Kyrie Irving's a point guard, and he's a good one. He's at 8,300. The matchup is solid. You should be in your head going, 50 points are coming here for Kyrie. That's what you should be thinking of. You don't expect it. You say, I'll be happy with 40. I think he can get 40. But he's got huge upside of being a guy who can pretty comfortably put up 50 points in this really positive matchup for him against the Nuggets. As for Jameer, he had a nice 37-point performance today, but is averaging under 20 over his last 5. So not a strong play at 4,400. And Jameer Nelson and Jamal Murray as a pairing. Just the names just get to me. The two jams at the start. You've been jammed. 4,000 for Jamal Murray. 4 points today in 15 minutes. That's not going to cut it. At shooting guard, Kyle Korver at 3,900. Had a monster the other day. And then had whatever the opposite of an anti-monster. 11 points in his last encounter, 3,900. I have zero faith in Korver as a cash play, but it's a positive matchup against the Nuggets. Why wouldn't you take a look in a GPP? But just don't expect that 8 of 9 3-point shooting that he put together the other day, which I'm sure you wouldn't. Gaz Harris at 5,100 for Gaza. He had 27 today, 25. I don't know if his tournament upside is that high, but I reckon his cash floor is pretty solid, and he comes in at 5,000 at DraftKings. No real worries about using Gaz, a real solid option, whereas Fart and Will Barton's at 6,200 now. It's getting up there. If Farid is out, though, I'm all about Barton. Again, I think he can put up some big numbers. He had 35 today. He put up 43 average in the last 3, but it requires that absence. Now, the Rooster being out does help him, but if Farid's out, it just gives him that little bit of an extra boost to make you feel a little bit better about spending $6,000 plus for the big fartster. Small forwards, Wilson Chandler, 6,700, just been as consistent as anything, averaging 36 over the last 3, crushing value majority of the nights. No concern with using Wilson in this new role. Now, when we look at him on DraftKings, he comes in at 7,200, and that's a somewhat scary looking price. The numbers have been good for him, but that price just feels like it's a little bit too high for me. As for LeBron, he is at 11,100. It's a big price for LeBron, but it has come down by $400. The matchup here is pretty good for him against Denver. Don't hate it. DraftKings, 10,200. That's brilliant. Love it. 10,200 for LeBron. It's a way to go against, say, someone who's taking the Kevin Durant against Oklahoma City scenario, which is going to be a very popular one to go for. And LeBron at 10,200 really comes in as a nice play in that sort of a situation. At power forward, Kevin Love at 8,200, a $700 price dip. Really love this spot here for Love. You should be approaching 40 points. 8,200 on DraftKings. Not quite as in love, just given the extra, pun unintended, given the extra price rise, but a solid play nonetheless. Nikola Jokic, 9,900 for Jokic. 60 points today, monstered it. 9,900 back-to-back against the Cavs, who limit what centers can do. I'd be inclined to stay off him. And I know it's hard to say because it's being Jokic, but at that price, maybe I'd be off. 9,000 for him on DraftKings? Fine. No worries. Use him at 9,000. The 9,900 is where it gets a little bit dicey for me. Ken Farid, I wouldn't use him regardless of if he's playing or not, while Darrell Arthur's up to 4,300, and that's too high for a guy that seems limited at 21 minutes a night. The centers, Tristan Thompson at 5,400. His upside is weird. He has these occasional blowout games where they're just monsters, but in general, he just doesn't get enough happening. So I'm not really feeling that all that much. All right, let's shift over to the next game now. We've got the Miami Heat looking to keep this win streak going against the Philadelphia 76ers. The Heat are favored by 3.5, and the total is 206 points here. Obviously, we need to check the status of Dion Waiters, who's missed the last few games, but the Heat have not missed a beat with Dion out. For the Sixers, Joel Embiid is out, and Richaun Holmes is probable with an upper respiratory tract issue. Let's talk point guards. TJ McConnell comes in at 5,400. He had a nice 32-pointer in the last game. Solid performances, but nothing spectacular from TJ, so I'm not overly interested in him, especially given it's a somewhat negative matchup going up against the Heat. But if you look on DraftKings, he's a much better option. At $5,000, I feel pretty good about him at that sort of a price, given what he can do. Not sure how through the roof his upside is, but at 5,000, I don't really have too much of a concern with considering him there. Tyler Johnson is at 5,600. Smashed through that value today, but hadn't in the previous games. I actually think this is a good GPP spot for Tyler Johnson, whereas Spanish Chocolate is not someone I'll be using. If we look at Goran Dragic, he comes in at 7,900. Big price for Dragic. Yes, he's been crushing it, but 7,900 on DraftKings, 81 on FanDuel is just not smart pricing to use, I don't think. In a GPP, sure, but over his last over his last 7 games, he hasn't gotten to 6x value. So where's the GPP upside in that? I think the answer is it's probably not there, and there are going to be better options for you. The shooting guards for this game, it's not ideal. I wouldn't use Dion Waiters if he played at 7,100. Feels a little bit high. Wayne Ellington's a GPP only type of player, and Gerald Henderson's a nothing. At small forward is where it's at. Bob Carver's at 6,300. They've bumped him by $500, which I don't enjoy. That's on FanDuel. On DraftKings, he comes at 5,900, where they've also bumped him by 500, but to 5,900, which is a fine price tag. So I like Bob Cove in this situation. The matchup is not as bad as it might look on the surface. I think Covington can still get it going. He does have that element of risk given his shooting inconsistencies, but I like him at 5,900, less so at 6,300 where he is at FanDuel. Scooter Magruder's at 3,800. He's averaging 28 points over the last 3. If Dion is out, Scooter is a GPP guy. I thoroughly believe that Scooter is a GPP guy. He'll play 30 minutes, and he's getting more aggressive with what he does defensively and offensively. So at 3,800, why wouldn't you use Magruder if Dion Waiters is out? I think he maintains really good value. Source Castillo. He's actually a shooting guard on FanDuel. I forgot to mention him, but I do want to take this moment. Someone did ask me in the comments on YouTube yesterday, what's with Nick Stauskas' nickname? This is not my invention. I did not make up Source Castillo. What it was back when he was in Sacramento, the closed captioning. People, they for people who can't hear, they type out what the commentators are saying. And instead of saying Nick Stauskas, the closed captioning, whether it was an automated system or not, they must have misheard, and they typed in Source Castillo for 3. I don't know how that sounds like Stauskas, or Stauskas, Source Castillo. Maybe I can see it. But it was Stauskas for 3, and the closed captioning came up as Source Castillo for 3. So there you go. That is why Nick Stauskas is called Source Castillo. Now, he has been playing very well off the bench, but not necessarily well enough that he can go past a $400 price rise to $4,000. So I'm not in on big Mr. Castillo here. At power forwards, where there's something is going to happen, maybe. How's that for being non-committal? Nerlens Noel at 5,200. Had a good game in the last one, 27 points. But even in these games with Embiid out, he's not getting full run of minutes, and he's not looking like an awesome option. Sure, in a GPP, you hope he goes off defensively, but it's just not happening for him all the time. Where Ersan Ilyasova is in a real slump, apart from the last game where he did bounce back, but he's only averaging 18 points over the last 3. 5,600 for Ersan in a negative matchup. I would pass on using Ersan in this one. What about Jim Johnson, our martyr, our only son? He is at $6,000. He dropped 44 today. He's averaging 31 over the last 5. No problem with Jim. I don't know how high his upside is, but I feel like for cash, he's very, very safe. And that's a good thing. Dario Saric at 4,800. Massive game for Saric in the last game. In fact, he's been strong for a while. The matchup's a shit one. The salary's bumped by $500. That's on FanDuel. I'm not totally into it. 4,600 for him on DraftKings. Not totally into that. I would restrict him to being a GPP type of a play. At center, Hassan Whiteside is at 9,100. Got a real history of wrecking the Sixers. Hasn't been awesome recently. He's been all right, but not $9,100 worth. But he's averaging 50 the last 3 times he's played the Sixers, so I love this GPP upside for Hassan. he could have one of those monster 30 and 20 type of games that we've seen him have. And Jali Lokafor, who had a 34-point game and then had an 8-point game in his last couple of starts, he's at 4,600. GPPs only for him. He's shit, so I don't think you can really trust him to be a cash play, but he can have those nights where he goes off. Will it happen against Whiteside? Whiteside's not a good defender, so it could definitely happen. The problem is Okafor is an absolutely historically abysmal defender, so he could get demoralised by Whiteside, and that could impact what he does offensively, I believe. All right, the next game. Where are we with this one? The Golden State Warriors, Oklahoma City Thunder. People haven't been waiting for this game for a while, have they? Just another game, I'm sure, as Kevin Durant returns to Oklahoma City for the first time. The Warriors are favored by 7, and the total is 226.5. I know that everyone's going to be watching this, and I can 100% guarantee you that the Oklahoma City Thunder crowd is going to boo, and they're going to boo their ass off every time that Durant touches the ball. There'll be a smattering of cheers. And by a smattering, I mean a bee's dick amount. It is going to be boos raining down on boos, raining down on probably more boos. But maybe that gets Kevin Durant fired up. He is going to be pushing one way or the other early on. Now, whether that push turns into an absolute shitful performance, or whether that push turns into a Hulk Hogan, raise your hand to your ear in front of the crowd with the finger up to the lips performance, I don't know. I would think it's a bit more Hulkster, a bit more shush from Kevin Durant, and that's going to make him a really interesting play. But I think everyone's going to be buying into the Durant narrative, and it could make him a fade in GPPs. That's me just trying to get psychological with everyone. How about Russ Westbrook? 12,500 for Russ. Has not done well against the Warriors in these games. If there's anyone that's going to push, it's going to be Russ. So is he a risky play? Shit, yeah, he is. Hugely risky. 12,500 for Russ. It's a lot of cash. If he gets you 45, it's pretty much a nightmare result at that sort of salary. And there's a real chance that he pushes it too hard. There's probably a 20% chance that he goes bananas and has a 40-20-20 game. That could happen. That's how crazy he could go. And that's why you want to leave him as a GPP type of player in most scenarios. Steph at 9,500. I think he'll be fairly deferential in this game. I'm not really that interested in Steph at 9,500. And Campaign, who had that little cameo in the last game, they're not going to rely heavily on Campaign in this game. They didn't rely heavily on him in the last game, despite him scoring those 21 points in 13 minutes. The shooting guards, Vic Oladipo, decent history against the Warriors. 6,400 for Vic, really playing well at the moment, averaging 38 over the last 3. I think he's a guy to go at in this game that not many people will. He's averaging 40 in his last 3 on DraftKings, 6,300. I think there's good value in Oladipo. Klay Thompson had 41 today. The risk is there with him. Again, he could be a little bit of a backseat guy to Durant. No chance for cash. That's pretty much what you say for him every game this season for Klay. But in tournaments, might want to look at it. I'm not feeling all that confident about using Klay in any sort of situation, though. In this matchup, the small forwards. Here it is, the one we want to talk about. Andre Robertson at 4,200. Robertson's been crushing it. He's averaging 30 over the last 3. Been more aggressive defensively, getting defensive numbers, getting rebounds, 4,200. Andre Robertson averages 9 points against the Warriors in the last 3 games. That's far from ideal. Sure, you want to look at him in a tournament, but they can absolutely, well, not play him off the floor, but they can just make him a complete irrelevancy. So he's got tournament upside at 3,900. If he gets you 30 at 3,900, you're laughing. If he gets you 8 at 3,900, it's not a complete disaster, but it's obviously not paying the bills for that day. Let's talk Durant, though. He's at 10,700. The last 2 times that he's played the Thunder, he's averaged 57 points. So he's done very well. They've bumped his salary $400. I think that's on FanDuel, $300 on DraftKings. I think they've bumped that salary because they know that people will be on him. 10,700 is fine for him on FanDuel. DraftKings, he comes in at 9,700, where he's averaging 62 the last 3 times. The last 2 times he's played against his former team. Again, the risk is there. Does he push too hard? He didn't in the first 2 games, but this is different. This is heading back to OKC. Well, he pushed in those games, but it just worked out. This is heading back to OKC. Could he be rattled? He doesn't seem like he will be, but there's a lot to think about here. Absolutely monster GPP upside, but also I think he's going to be owned in shit tons of leagues or on shit tons of rosters. The power forward spot, going by our pattern, it is Domantas Sabonis' turn to play big minutes. He's done pretty well against the Warriors, to be honest. Minimum salary guy, wouldn't hate throwing him in as a GPP. I think he's absolutely worth a look at that sort of low salary. And he comes in at minimum on both sides, DraftKings and FanDuel. 3,000 on DraftKings, where he's averaging 19 the twice that he's played against the Warriors so far, and that's great return at 3,000. Has done well against them, which is not something you could say about him against every team. As for Draymond, $8,000, well, smashed through that today. Hadn't really been right at that level up until this game, but much like Steph, much like Clay, does he take somewhat of a backseat. He hasn't really performed superbly against the Thunder in the past, but like these other guys, like Clay, like Steph, you could always throw them into a GPP and it works out for them. At center, Steve Adams looks appealing. He's at 6,300. He's playing so many minutes. But the Warriors, man, they do have a habit of chewing up and spitting out centers. It hasn't been the case as much lately. We saw Gasol play all right. We saw Mason Plumlee have a few decent games. We've seen a few centers stick on the court and play well. Adams at 6,300 is a guy, and 6,000 on DraftKings is a guy that the minutes are going to be through the roof most likely. Because you could say, oh, we can't play Adams, but who the hell else are you going to play? Are you going to put Jeremy Grant out there? Maybe. But I think Adams gets big minutes, and I think that he is absolutely worth, and I said absolutely a lot in this podcast, it feels like. Steve Adams at that sort of a price has great GPP upside. Great, like 7x type value potentially if he gets 40 minutes, which is a huge chance that he gets. Not much else happening for this game. All right, let's head into these last three games before we wrap up the show. Orlando Magic, they are traveling to the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavs are favored by 6, and the total is 204.5. I don't expect to see Darren Williams play. And for the Magic, Aaron Gordon is questionable with that bone bruise in his foot. If Gordo is out, Hazonia will likely start. But what happened in the last game is Hazonia played a little bit. Jeff Green barely played. And more minutes went to DJ Augustine, CJ Watson, Lord Alfred J. Payton, and Evan J. Fournier. I think they were the guys that got all that extra bump. Let's talk point guards, though. Alfred Payton is going to come off the bench again. Nonsensical. Can't use him. Frank Vogel's a dick. DJ Augustine at minimum salary, unlikely to be a useful guy. What about Yogi Ferrell? He's at 5,700, but despite all the hoopla about Yogi, he's averaging 24.5 points over the last three, which at 5,700 does not get it done for you. It seems like teams have figured him out to a degree. He's still been good, and he has still been a useful NBA player. He just has not been that guy that blew up against the Blazers and went bananas. And at 5,700, I'm not feeling super pumped about spending that sort of cash on big Kevin Ferrell. I think you can do better than him at that sort of a price tag. Devin Harris at 41 is an interesting one. He played big minutes the last couple of games, 26 points in 29 minutes in the last game, and he's at 4,100. He'd be worth a GPP look to me if he can just get anything going and play those big minutes again. That's the key for him. At shooting guard, Seth Curry is at 5,500. Has not been at that level recently, but I like the matchup for him. I'd probably look more at Seth as a GPP guy. On DraftKings, he comes in at 5,000. Now, that's a much better matchup for him, a much better price point for him. So I do like Seth a lot more over on DraftKings, whereas Wes Matthews is at 5,800. I don't think Wes is reliable, and I don't think he's got high enough upside. So to me, he's not someone that I'd be super keen on. Evan Fournier at 5,500. Love it. Love it, love it. 43 points in the last game. Yeah, it's a shit match because they're going to have a low point spread, low total, a low-ish total. But I really like Fournier here. I think he's going to take on a pretty significant load and be a useful option. Now on DraftKings, where he's up to 6,200, I'm less enthused, but I'm still not totally off it there. As for Aaron Gordon, I wouldn't want to use him even if he's playing, and I don't think that using Hazonia or Jeff Green if he's out has really looked like a great option. At power forward, Serge Ibaka at 6,000, I think that's fine. It is a decently negative matchup for him, but it's not horrible. I think Serge can still get you the 30 points. At 66 on DraftKings, that feels like an absolute write-off. I forgot to mention the pencil. Let's talk about him. 6,500 for Harry Barnes. Fine. I don't know if his upside's all that high, but I think that he feels fairly solid for cash, and I feel pretty good that he's going to get to that 5x type of value. Let's talk Dirk, who's been crushing it at the moment. 5,600 for Dirk, averaging 31 over the last 3. Yeah, love it. 5,300 on DraftKings, no problems at all. The matchup shouldn't bother him. His form is back. He's playing big minutes. Everything looks good for Dirk Nowitzki at the moment. Dwight Powell is a complete roller coaster. He put up a total of 0 points in the last game, so that shows you how well things are going there. But he could just as easily come out with an absolute monster. 2 steals, 2 blocks, 10 points, 8 rebounds. He could do all that, and that's what he's done in the past. But who knows with the way that Carlisle runs that situation with the power forwards. At centre, or the centres. At centre, Nikola Vucevic at 7,300. Really on a strong run at the moment. Negative matchup. Terrible matchup, in fact, for centres and just players in general. But Vooch is worth a look. He's not the strongest player. There are 8 games on. You can find better options, but not many better ones. So I do think that he is still worth a look. While Bismack Biyombo is probably the opposite of being worth a look in most cases. All right, let's move ourselves on to the next game. We've got the Phoenix Suns backing up in a back-to-back against the Rockets. The Rockets are favoured by a monstrous 13.5. The total is 231.5. This has got blowout written all over it. A back-to-back on the road against the Rockets. Nothing looks great here for the Suns. Now, they're probably going to be without Tyson Chandler, would be my guess. The Rockets have got a few scenarios we need to look at as well. Eric Gordon and Nene missed the last game. And KJ McDaniels is now questionable due to paternity. Not questioning his paternity, but he's having a baby. Or his missus is having a baby. So he could miss the game. But it doesn't matter because he doesn't play anyway. The Gordon and Nene ones are the ones we look at. If Nene is out, Montrezl Harrell gets a bump. And he becomes an interesting guy to look at. If Gordon is out, maybe you want to have a look at Sammy Decker, but he struggled in the last game. Corey Brewer was all right, but nothing too exciting. It just means more minutes for Pat Bev and more output for Trevor Ariza most of the time. I'm assuming that Tyson Chandler will not play, so that's how I've looked at these preview of this game. Let's talk point guards. Eric Bledsoe is at 7,200. That's on DraftKings, which is a very, very nice price at 7,200 for Bledsoe on DraftKings. I think it works. Very well. No, it's not DraftKings, my mistake, sorry. It is FanDuel. Or has my screen completely screwed me up here? Yes, it has. I've got DraftKings and FanDuel on both of my screens. So you know what? While this primitive internet... I know I tweeted it out the other day, but there's a thing they're rolling out in Australia here called the National Broadband Network to try and get fast internet out to more places in the country. Not available at my house. We're still running on ADSL 2. Over here, can't get cable, can't get the NBN, can't get any sort of speeds. And the NBN's offering like 100 megabits per second speeds. I'm at like 9, I think, something ridiculous like that. And the head of the NBN came out the other day and said, I don't think that Australians want super fast internet. In fact, if we offered it for free, I don't think they'd take it. I know this is something that most of you don't care about, but how absolutely ridiculously stupid do you have to be to think that the Australian public would say, please, can you give us inferior products, slow internet, and make us pay money for it? Can you honestly believe that anyone would think that is what any consumer would want? And that is what this dick knob came out and said. Even if we gave them super fast internet for free, I don't think they'd want it. Mate, all I want is free internet. I will pay for it. I will happily pay for it. But no. Why would we decide to do that? And this is the guy, the head of the program that's rolling out super fast internet. I'm telling this story because my screen is completely screwed. And because I'm broadcasting this live, it takes forever for this information to come back up. But we are almost there. Let's talk Phoenix and Houston now after I've given you my take on Australian idiotic technological politics. Eric Bledsoe is at 7,200 on DraftKings. Really, really good price for him there. Obviously had a great game today, but had been struggling prior to this performance. But at 7,200, that's definitely worth a look. Now on FanDuel, he comes in at 8,300, which is a much higher price. Not keen on Bledsoe at that 8,300. But what I do like on the point guard side of things is Pat Bev at 5,400. We assume that what's the guy's name? Eric Gordon. We assume that Eric Gordon's out. I really like this situation for Beverly. He's averaging 29 points over the last 3 games. As it is, at 5,400, he's got the ability to hit 30 here. Whether he does it or not remains to be seen. Now, if we look at Beverly over on DraftKings at 5,600, less interested. Not an ideal price tag, I don't think, at that sort of at his level of production at 5,600. Just doesn't feel like it's going to work out all that well for me. What position are we at next? Shooting guard, Eric Gordon at 5,500. I don't think he's got necessarily all that high upside at 5,500, but I think he's a solid cash play if he happens to play, which we don't know yet. 12,500 for Jimmy Harden. Yeah, that might be, that's tough, but if you're spending up at cash, if you're spending up at shooting guard, Jim is one of the guys to go for. Clearly, he's averaging 54 over his last 5 on FanDuel. 12,500, you want him to be a little bit better than that, but I don't feel like it's a terrible play to consider Harden here. He's at 12.9 on DraftKings. Probably like, even though the salary is higher, I think there's probably a little bit more value in him over on DraftKings, just given the scoring system. Devin Booker at 6,800. It's high, but he's had a couple of good strong ones in a row. But on a back-to-back, I'd probably look at fading Devin here at that $6,800 price tag. Any other shooting guards worth talking about? Not really. TJ Warren at small forward, 4,500. He's a GPP guy only. We never know what we're going to get from him. While Trev Ariza at 5,500 gets a real bump if Eric Gordon is out. I like him a lot more at 5,500 if Gordo happens to be sitting. He's at 6,000 on DraftKings, which is not an appealing price to me under any circumstance, really. PJ Tucker's not really involved for me either. Now at power forward, this is where it really comes. Now I'm assuming that Tyson Chandler is out, so Alex Len is at 3,600. If Chandler is out, Len becomes that guy that I lock in a lineup and build around from there, because he can easily, the last time he played 28 minutes, he had 21 points, which is a low output for him. He can at 3,600, he can very easily get 25. He can get 35. He can get 40. He can go out there with big double-doubles and big block numbers. Now, he's not all that consistent, but he's also not a write-off in that category. And that price, $100 more than minimum, is ludicrous. Now, on DraftKings, he is actually minimum. He is $3,000. As no-brainerish as it really is. It doesn't get much more no-brainerish than to consider Alex Len at $3,000. If, as we assume, Tyson Chandler is ruled out. Ryan Anderson's a GPP guy at 4,700, has been terrible lately, but you feel a big one is coming for him. Well, Marquise Chris is always just a GPP guy, especially if Chandler is out, but he can't stay on the court, and that's why you can't rely on Marquise Chris for cash games, despite that nice price tag that sits over him. The centers, Clint Capella at 5,300. Really like Capella at 5,300. It's a great price tag. Now on DraftKings, he comes at 59. That's not quite as appealing, so I'm not super into that. Nene's at 3,000. If Nene plays, he's at 3,000. I would look at him as a GPP guy. He's exceeded 5x value in 2 of his last 3 games. I would, at $3,000, I would definitely consider Nene at that price. And Alan Williams is a minimum salary player, is someone that if Tyson is out, you would have to consider him as a GPP option also. All right, no more politics stories. Let's roll onto the last game of the night, and it is the Boston Celtics taking on the Utah Jazz in the Gordon Hayward Bowl. The Jazz are favored by 5, and the total is 203.5. Jay Crowder, we're not sure whether he will play, still dealing with that illness in his family, so all our thoughts go out to Jay's family. And also, when Jay Crowder was announced as out the other day, yes, it came after lineup locks. All right, yes, the Celtics probably knew beforehand that he was out. All right, that's frustrating. I understand that. But people personally abusing Jay Crowder is just it's not right. Like, the guy's got someone sick in his family that he had to go home to Dallas for, and people calling him a piece of shit, not right. I understand that you're frustrated. I understand that, hey, the Celtics probably had that info and could have passed it on earlier. But Jay Crowder's not a piece of shit for this at all. And that is it's just a horrific mentality. Sorry. If you're listening to this podcast and you're one of those people who said that, I don't apologize. That's a horrific mentality. You should not have that mentality. I don't know if Jay Crowder will play. If he is out, Marcus Smart gets a big bump, as does Jaylen Brown, and George Hill is expected back for the Utah Jazz. Let's talk Georgie Hill. He comes in at 6,100 and he gets the non-existent defense of Isaiah Thomas here. He's at 6,000 on DraftKings as well. I think that George is a pretty decent bet to have a game that exceeds that sort of value. Not strongly, because this game's not a strong one in terms of low pace and the way that Utah plays. But he would be a guy that I would have up the list for players that I'd want to take a peek at. Other point guards, well, it is Isaiah Thomas. He's at 9,800, so a big dip in his salary because he's been nowhere near 10,500 in the last couple. He's averaging 44 over the last 5, 40 over the last 3. Still feels a little bit highly priced. I would now look at him as a GPP guy, but with a low-paced game, a good defensive side in Utah, it's not ideal. Now, he comes at 9,200 on DraftKings, so another big dip there. Again, really good GPP option, but not strong for cash, and not even your strongest GPP option, I don't believe, just given all those other factors that I mentioned. At shooting guard, Marcus Smart, who had 43 in the last game, he's at 5,700. If we hear Crowder's out, I'd be okay with Smart. Otherwise, that just feels too expensive for me. And 5,100 for him on DraftKings, the same story. Shooting guards. Hard to really trust Alec Burks at this point. What about the small forwards? Joey Ingles had a monster in the last game, 30 points at 3,800, great value, but I think a lot of that value came because Hill was out, so I wouldn't be expecting Joe to do it again. As for Gordo Hayward, 8,100, the dude's averaging 43 over the last 5, absolutely crushing it, 45 over the last 5 on DraftKings at 7,800. No problems using Hayward. He should feel pretty safe using him in cash against a relatively poor Boston defense. Jaylen Brown had 26 in the last game. He's at 3,800. Rule Jay Crowder out. Jaylen Brown comes in. Becomes an option. Even I would consider an option for cash. I wouldn't feel that strongly about it, but I would consider it, whereas Joe Johnson's more a GPP upside play. If Crowder plays, I don't really think that 6,200 is the appropriate salary for him. Derek Favors is worth a look. $5,000, averaging 30 over the last 3, played 33 minutes in the last game at 5,000. I think there's an appeal there on both sides for big Derek Favors. Really good opportunity for him. Amir Johnson, Kelly Olynyk, these sort of guys in Boston. Who knows what they're going to do? Ruling them out for any sort of cash game situation. Olynyk was decent in the last game, 23 points, but he is at 4,200, so it takes away a lot of his upside. How about Al Horford, where he's come down to 7,100 on FanDuel? Keep coming, FanDuel. That is still too high for me, and he's at 6,200 on DraftKings. Now that's getting interesting. 6,200. The problem is he's got Rudy Gobert. And Rudy Gobert annihilates opposition centers. So not sure I want to go it, but if I'm going for Al Horford, it's 6,200 on DraftKings is the one I want. Rudy Gobert now a $700 up on DraftKings to 7,400. Love the matchup. Why not, Rudy? Really like it. 7,800 for him on FanDuel is fine value as well. All right, we are done. Let's talk picks of the day before we get out of here. On FanDuel, Devin Harris at 41 as a GPP option, Pat Bev at 54, and Kyrie at 8,300, the shooting guards. JJ Redick at 47, Vic Oladipo at 64, and Jimmy Harden at 12.5. The small forwards, Andre Robertson 42, the pencil at 65, and Kevin Durant at 10,700. At power forward, Ryan Anderson 47, Serge Ibaka at 6,000, and Kevin Love 8,200. And at centre, Johnny Henson 39, Clint Capella 53, and Hassan Whiteside at 9,100. On DraftKings, TJ McConnell 5,000, Eric Bledsoe 72, and Kyrie at 84. The shooting guards, Seth Curry at 5,000, Oladipo at 63, and Harden at 12.9. At small forward, Mick Beasley 42, Bob Covers at 59, and LeBron's at 10.2. Of course, Durant is an option there. At power forward, Marvin Williams 49, Dirk at 53, and Paul George at 81. And at centre, Mo Spates 3,500, Miles Turner 58, and Hassan Whiteside 8,500. For the Aussie sites, on Moneyball, CJ Watson 35, Georgie Hill 56, and Kyrie at 87. At shooting guard, Gaz Harris 47, Farton Will Barton at 54, and Jimmy Harden at 13. The small forwards, Mick Beasley's at 36, Wilson Chandler's at 59, and Kevin Durant's at 10.7. At power forward, Favors is at 46, Dirk is at 56, and Love is at 81. And at centre, Nerlens Noel 49, Clint Capella 57, and Nikola Jokic at 93. On Draft Stars, Devin Harris 50-50, George Hill 10,300, and Russ Westbrook 23-3. The shooting guards, Scooter Magruder at 5'2", Farton Will Barton at 8'6", and Kyrie at 16'8". The small forwards, Michael Beasley at 5,000, Wilson Chandler at 10'4", and Gianni Antetokounmpo at 17'7". The power forwards, Marquise Chris 62, Nikola Jokic at 13'2", and Kevin Love at 14'4", and at centre, Darrell Arthur at 52, Clint Capella 11'1", and Hassan Whiteside 16'9". Follow me on Twitter, guys, at redrock_bball. I hope you enjoyed the basketball from Friday. I hope good luck with your weekly lineups. Good luck with your seasonal stuff. Good luck with your DFS lineups. We are done here, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Michael Malone.